My name is Gavin. Looking forward to speaking with you all today. My colleague Peter, you're going to start us off on the innovation and emissions management and reporting session. And so it'll be myself, Peter Manos, David Rocha from Walters Kluwer, and Jim Frazier as well. So we're really looking forward to an hour dedicated to this amazing topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Hey, everyone, I'm Peter Manos. Great to see all of you. So when we look at emissions monitoring, obviously the focus is on measuring and tracking and reporting on emissions, but really it fits into a larger context of emissions management where systems are becoming increasingly sophisticated that enable asset owner operators to link to better operations, link to their digital transformation evolution as well, and really be more responsive and able to reduce risks in the long run as well as in the short term. I want to ask a quick question. Raise your hand if you're going to be with us at this conference on Thursday morning. Excellent. Andy was right. We have good long-term attendance. I have a session on this topic that goes into more detail. It's on Thursday morning called Clearing the Air for Better Emissions Management, Risk Reduction, and Smart Infrastructure. So I have presenters from Citgo, Devon Energy, as well as Georgia Pacific on that end user panel session. So our findings with our research at ARC, with the Pacesetter report series that Mike mentioned, we really see the best operators are ones who have a good OT foundation. They really bring the end users in from the bottom up to get adoption of the emissions monitoring capabilities that help them operate better. So the technologies that we list here obviously are familiar to most of you in these industrial areas, and the use cases are cut across the oil and gas industry, chemicals, other industrial facilities, as well as the pipelines. So it's within the facility, as well as monitoring the fence line, and there's also the safety aspect of better leak detection in real time, which obviously is super important as well. So meaning the environmental regulations that are becoming stricter, reporting requirements across not just methane, but many other species of substances that are emitted, tracking them better, determining the source of the leaks using AI and ML and smart sensor technologies, modeling the airflow within the facility and around the fence line, the ability to be not just a better steward of your own assets, but of the community in which you're operating. In some cases, end users are reporting the fence line can be picking up emissions that might be future emission from a neighboring plant, not necessarily their own facility as well, right? So you're helping the whole community of fellow industrial concerns in your community and obviously the local population as well to have better monitoring of your stewardship of your assets. So the benefits of this increase greatly with more sophisticated use of artificial intelligence and real-time data, and you're freeing up your operators. You know, in the older systems, you'd have manual readings, right? You'd go from the control room and take some measurements, sometimes in risky parts of the plant that were hard to access to see if there were leaks or other issues. Being able to have this real-time leak detection, being able to tie continuous emissions monitoring to your operations and fine-tune your combustion, at startup as well as during your continuous operations. These things are helping to really gain operational benefit, cost benefit, and better sustainability posture, which, from a risk reduction point of view, is a really great use of those resources. So hope to see you on Thursday morning as well. And I'm going to pass the baton on to Gavin.
All right, guys, let's talk about some regulations. If you were here last year, I spoke about a similar topic, so I'm really looking forward to diving a bit more. My name is Gavin again. I work on the supply chain team and also the energy team. A lot of my work focuses on regulations and their impacts and the ever changing environment of regulations. So, today I wanted to speak with you about the EU regulations, but also the regulations within the state of California. Just to really set the stage here, the EU in 2020 they released the European Green New Deal, and that's kind of just like the bellwether of regulations internationally. And that regulation is really just to set the stage for a net zero transition by 2050. And we can really see it as an incubator for business practices under sustainability regulations. Obviously, this adds a lot of new challenges and responsibilities for businesses, but it's also an avenue for opportunities as well. Um, I think the EU Green Deal really solidified its commitment to net neutrality, and with that came over 175 directives and regulations, expanding clean energy investment, technology investment, stronger supply chain requirements, which I know a lot about, carbon pricing, and reporting mandates. So let's move on to the actual nitty gritty of the EU regulations and reporting responsibilities. Here, this is this image to the left of the screen is basically all of the regulations focus on transparency and reporting. Specifically, not all of these are requiring reporting mandates, but the ones in bold here, the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure, CSDD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and the EU Deforestation Act. These are all pretty focused on being able to, or is requiring companies to report on certain aspects. So, for example, the CSRD is asking for emissions scopes 1 through 3, and specifically the EU deforestation one. That one is asking, is your product made with any? Was your product and any resources within the product made on land that was deforested since 2020? Which I think is going to be a major. That's going to be a major challenge for a lot of companies to be able to prove to border agents that this product was not made with resources on deforested land. Okay, so let's move on to the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. So kind of think of this as the general framework of what is required within the CSRD. This is kind of just showing, so on the left-hand side, we have an environmental. So we're looking for, the requirements are looking for information regarding climate change, pollution, biodiversity and ecosystems. Social, we're looking for requirements on workforces in the value chain, affected communities, customers and end users, and then all the way to the left on business conduct. I believe that the European standards here, there's definitely a large international demand for unification in these reporting standards. I think a lot of the times we have companies kind of doing required reporting, voluntary reporting, and you're just kind of scrounging around for all of these different reporting frameworks. I'm hoping that this will become the standard rather than having so many different frameworks, or I'm hoping that this is adapted to a larger framework so more companies will have a better idea of what will be expected of them as these regulations continue to roll through, which I think by 2030, a lot of companies will have to be subjected under the CSRD. So let's move a little bit to the state side. So in the state of California, we have SB 253, which is the Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act. I spoke about this a little bit last year, but SB 253 is requiring any companies making $1 billion, generating $1 billion within the state of California and doing business within the state of California, and beginning in 2026, utilizing 2025 data, they will be reporting scopes 1 through 3 emissions. And then additionally, SB 253 requires reporting companies that are reporting to get those reports third-party assured, which I think just really drives down, you need to be reporting good data because there's going to be that third-party assurance. An estimated 5,400 companies will be under this regulation or affected by this regulation. This applies to US-based partnerships, corporations, and other entities that have operations within the state. And moving on to something that was also passed in tandem with SB 253 is SB 261, the Climate-Related Financial Risk Act, which I think this one was pretty interesting. This bill applies to any U.S. corporation with doing business within the state of California with revenue over $500 million. This bill specifically is looking for companies to report a climate-related financial risk report, which details physical and transition threats that they face as a result of climate change. This is why I find it interesting. This bill aims to safeguard consumers and investors from losses resulting from climate change or climate-related disruptions to supply chains, workforces, and infrastructure. Here, obviously, the California wildfires in January, it was estimated that there was a total damage of $250 billion to $275 billion worth of damages. This is tangible, physical impacts due to climate change. And I think this bill here is really trying to safeguard investors and people investing in different projects. You don't want to lose your investment to climate change. So I think this one is pretty interesting. I know that was a little pessimistic, so I kind of wanted to end on a higher optimistic note. And I think for these next steps, before running to buy a solution, you first need to understand your needs and gaps. You also need to build a team responsible for reporting, whether this be the CSRD, SB 253, whatever other acronym you want to make up. These team members should represent different departments. So you want to have a team member from the finance team, the legal team, the data team, sustainability and operational team. You don't want this reporting responsibility to just fall on one group of people. I think obviously when you have a mixed bag of people within a team, you'll have a better end product, which is your report. And if you already do have a report, that's awesome. And what do you already cover within that report? And what are you missing from the established report to the additional responsibilities in your in these new reports under the CSRD? You need to understand your material impacts, environmental, social, and economics. And also, I really liked what Trent was saying earlier in terms of partnership is where can you engage with your stakeholders and how can you identify and reduce those material impacts that you had previously spoke about in your report. Now it's time to collect your data and or identify where that data lives. And this will become an annual practice. This is not going to be a one-time deal. And so this is why it's really important to invest in data accuracy practices and transparency, because you're going to be coming back to this this data year over year, and you want to make sure that it's correct. So finally, draft your report, review, make sure it meets all of the standards and requirements. And I think by this time when you're preparing to draft your report, this is where you can discuss the possibility of enlisting a solution and purchasing a solution to make sure you can bridge the gap between where you are and where you need to be. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I have a session on Wednesday at 4 p.m. if you're interested in this topic. We're going to be talking about regulatory compliance and reporting software. And on to David. Thank you.
So hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'll introduce you a little bit about myself and Wolters Kluwer. When I tell people I work for Wolters Kluwer, the common reaction I get is Wolters who? So I'll start with a little bit of myself first. So my background's environmental science. I spent 10 years in the oil and gas industry. I actually started out my career by being contracted in to help with one of these year-end sustainability reporting efforts. I suspect that people who are involved with that probably aren't here at the moment, Gavin, because they're all busy doing the year-end reporting. And then I had an opportunity to go deeper into operations working across process safety in frontline operations in the North Sea. And for the last 7 years, I've been building product solutions for enterprises to help them become safer and more sustainable and more reliable. So Wolters Who, you may have heard. Wolters Store is actually a 189-year-old Dutch organization originally. Many of you may recognize the name from being a publisher. I have a friend who's a judge, and he was like, "You work for Wolters Kluwer?" I never knew that. But really, what Wolters Kluwer does is it supports experts in their fields, whether that's in the legal profession, health, in tax and accounting, but also in environmental health and safety and operational risk. So we serve predominantly enable on large-scale enterprises here. And we're focused on 5 key areas. So ESG and environmental, as you might expect, those two are very closely related. Control of work, so that's things like permits to work, energy isolations, and also shift management. And then process safety, where we support process hazard analysis, barrier management, bow tie, management of change, and a few other solutions. So that's a little bit about what we do. You're going to hear a lot about AI at this conference and probably in the years to come. One of the things that we wanted to be really clear about is our approach at Wolters Kluwer to AI. Because it's easy to talk about AI, but AI comes with a lot of risks as well as the opportunities. In our space, the software that we do is mission critical. It involves whether or not people go home to their families at night. So ensuring the privacy and security of AI is absolutely fundamental. Being transparent and being logical is also a core principle. And lastly, it's about being fair and human focused. So what does that mean? That people have to understand how AI systems work and what it does and what it doesn't do. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this on Wednesday in the session that we have with Gavin. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of introduction here in terms of who I am and who Wolters Kluwer are, so you understand why I'm talking about this and not so much about carbon capture and storage. But thank you.
Thank you, David. Your mic is on, I would think. So I'd like to direct the question to you and then also have our audience consider questions you might want to raise. When you look in your crystal ball in the next 5 years in terms of trends with respect to EHS and ESG, what comes to the forefront in your thinking? Are you seeing it as being around the convergence of EHS and ESG perhaps, or other trends as well?
Yeah, I think the key trend was something that we actually started off this workshop talking about earlier. And that's something that's already separating the leaders from the laggards, and that's collaboration. That's precisely why I'm here. So we see a need for collaboration across different functions within the company. So that means EHS professionals have access to the same data that operations has, the same finance has access to that same information. So that's one aspect. The other aspect of collaboration is collaboration across different levels of the enterprise. So what corporation sees at the enterprise level is the same information that the business unit sees in operations. And then most importantly, and I think this is where forums such as this is so critically important, is collaboration across the supply chain, across the industry. I'm very fortunate to spend most of my career working safety, specifically within oil and gas. I host many customer forums, and they always collaborate on this topic. They're always sharing ideas, best practices openly, because they all know they benefit from a rising tide. So I'd say that's the biggest factor driving the software industry, and that's taking shape in things like standards and things like API development. And so, I and my team spend a lot of time collaborating with, people who are traditional competitors to us, because we see the value in cooperating.
Fantastic. Thank you. Maybe a moment of silence here will help someone spark a question.
Peter, I'll take a follow-up question.
Hey, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah. I love that idea of anecdotal collaboration, but is the industry maturing where you do have some APIs being developed or some consortiums that might have some data fabrics being developed or anything like that?
Yeah, I think, ESG is a good example of that. And we've seen over the years many standards that have been developed in order to facilitate this. think there's, we see, for example, in process safety, there have been various committees where certain standards have been developed in terms of how to measure process safety, and those have been, initiated in certain industries and adopted across the new industries. I think those are things that will continue to prevail. And I think there's lots of more opportunity to go, right? And now what we're seeing is, I remember 10 years ago, there was this idea of big data and how big data was going to change the world. And that's, the initial reaction to that was, take data from all of these different systems that live within the enterprise and dump it onto a massive data lake. And then point all sorts of tools at it and mine insights out of it. I think, that was a hugely important step. What we see today is the evolution of that. So data is interwoven much more deeply into the processes that professionals use on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's something going to continue to mature as we see.
Fantastic. So I hear all this talk about collaboration. I work for the Open Group, and I don't know if any of you are following the work that the Open Group is doing in the Open Footprint Forum. Fits right in with what you guys are talking about.
Absolutely. And it's great to see. And this, I think, is one of the great opportunities of being in this forum. I saw that on the agenda that, what you guys do and how you're facilitating that. It's going to become more, for us as a software provider, it's not up for us to really define those standards. We're working with, customers and industry groups to, really establish those best practices. We have, lots of customers when they're starting on their journey or looking to go into the next step, they, one of the key questions they have is, what else are people doing? I don't want to be inventing these processes. Make sure we're learning from the best.
Excellent, David. Thank you, Alan.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. My name is Flávio Waltz from Ernst & Young, Brazil. I love, David, this picture. I also take a picture for myself. And the question is, a lot of people should be here, people in the big companies that communicate the ESG reports to the marketing, to the investors, and they are not. And all the data come from the OT. So my point is, I believe for the next steps inside the big companies, it's mandatory to have something like a green OT approach, how to use data, active data, online data to report, for example, emissions. In a refinery, if you had a problem in a burner, or if your gas is coming from with more ethane than methane, you emit a lot more. If you have a problem in the compressor, you will send more gas to the flare. So how at Enablo you are supporting your clients with this approach, using more data to the monthly report, ESG monthly report?
Yeah.
Sorry for the big question.
No, that's okay. Wait, olá, tudo bem?
Eu vi que você é brasileiro. Pode me responder em português. Disse que era português.
It's okay. So the question is mainly about, so how does all this data that's, theoretically being used to feed the corporate ESG reporting strategy, helping people at the operational level make decisions that help them actually keep emissions under control and gain operational resilience. That's a great example, actually, of what I talked about. In 10 years ago, we had big data, and typically what you'd see is you'd have analysts at the corporate center. Really, they were the only ones that would benefit from that data. With sensor data and APIs and protocols, it means you can actually make data available to the people that are able to act on it at the time that it matters and make it actionable. So that's really relevant for us. And so, for example, within our control of work system, we have an integration with Energy Institute Toolbox. And that means if I'm drafting a permit to work, it's analyzing what work I'm going to be doing, and it's bringing in lessons learned from across the industry and saying, well, actually, when other people have performed this job, here's some of the incidents they have, and here's why it happened. That's actionable information from me. I can act on that and make that relevant for me. Just going back to your points, So today we're able to combine the sensor data with EHS frameworks, and we provide tools to people at the operational level. So that means that when you're about to start a shift, or if I'm planning a permit for a week's long time, it's able to say, well, actually, in a week's time, your gas detector in this area is going to be overdue its safety critical maintenance. So I can actually bring that forward and take care of that maintenance ahead of schedule so that I can continue my job safely without needing to do some additional measures. So those are kind of a couple of examples of how making that data relevant to the people that are able to act on it at a timely manner is driving operational performance.
Obviously, we're seeing an increase in transparency in reporting, and it's a very difficult environment. I think about how Realtors Cora and Enabron are exemplary in that they do have case studies that you can go on their websites and see end users that are named and how they benefit from the solutions. Because a lot of the ESG software case studies of other solution providers are anonymized. A manufacturer of such and such product, the VP of operations said blah, blah, blah. So would you like to comment on any trends you're seeing in terms of the reporting and case studies on the part of your end users where that community and collaborative spirit is growing in a positive way?
Sure. Let me think about a couple of examples. I think we are very fortunate in terms of the footprints we have within the customers. And it's actually, our customers who, brought this forum to our attention, why we're participating, because they see the benefit in the synergy between that. So, one example of that is, for example, we work with some of the people that are going to be speaking here. So Exxon, BP, Equinor, they're all, have very active strategies when it comes to digital twin in operations. And, they're collaborating with each other in terms of what they're doing in that space and, developing standards together in order to make sure that, there's value across the industry. And I think what a lot of those organizations realize is that they can't do it on their own. They need all of the industry to come together on this, both their competitors and their partners as well, in order to make this happen.
Fantastic. I'm going to close with not so much a question, but just a thought to share with you all that part of our role, my role as an analyst, I've looked at a lot of the things that needed to be debunked in this past year. An example I'll give, I published the details. I'll talk about it generically right now. There's a very prestigious U.S. university that has an annual report about the carbon footprint of AI. And they quoted several things about one of the major AI solutions, how horrible it was that the energy footprint to train that model was XYZ amount of emissions. And that university has its own annual corporate social responsibility report, and they proudly said that they cut their carbon emissions 70%, which saved XYZ amount of carbon. So I, being an analyst, I took the 30% that they're still emitting. Every 4 hours that university operates, 365 days a year, every 4 hours it emits more carbon than the AI model that they were complaining about the training of. And so we need to always look at what are the two options, or what are the realistic options, this versus that, and what are the energy footprints and environmental consequences and financial benefits, pluses and minuses. If you're an industrial asset owner operator and had a server farm devoted to AI analytics that was only utilized 1% of the time, and now you go to cloud with one of these big new data centers from a third party, that is an asset that's being utilized so much more efficiently than the one you had in-house. So I just want to put forth that to be more transparent as industry personnel, you need us to support you in realistically comparing options rather than saying, oh, that big new data center is a bad thing. Look at the energy footprint of it. It's always have to compare options. So I'd like to leave that with you and maybe help you do that going forward as well with our team. Thanks.